Don, thanks for making some time. This should be fun.
Well, we don't do this very often, but I sure want the opportunity to sit down and ask you some questions that have come out of our sessions together, because I don't think I've entirely clicked into some things that you have talked about, and I need to hear a little bit more.
Yeah.
You make the statement when we get together about getting first impressions in like 9 nanoseconds or milliseconds or something.
Yeah.
Is that what it
is?
is?
Yeah,
I don't even know what a nanosecond or a millisecond is, but I assume it's less than a second.
it is.
People are making first impressions. Why is that even important? I mean, why should a ministry organization or the groups that we work with, why would they care about that?
Great question. So for the record, it's 100 milliseconds.
100 milliseconds. Oh.
Yeah, 100 milliseconds.
I was off by a factor of 10.
Yeah, and it was reported in it was research done, but it showed up in an article in Psychology Today in the mid 90s. I guess I'm a 90s guy. It's when I went to college and started coming to age. But in short, first impressions is really a human experience. So think about it. It's how we experience the entire world. You step into a room and you scan it.
Do you think that's true of just our culture? Or do you think that's true of all the other cultures in the world? Is this just a human thing, or is this an American thing?
It's a great question. I think it's hyper focused for America, because we come to this coffee, come to this restaurant, come to this. So I think we're hyper focused on it, but it's the human element, Don. And what I mean is, when everyone knows this, when you go to a speech and you see someone walk on stage, you're scanning them walking, their posture. If they drop their papers, do they have notes? Do they say, do they have good posture? Were they confident in making eye contact? You make some as you're scanning, you don't have to work for this. You go, this should be good. You have this little thought process, or, oh boy.
Yeah.
And boom, it's done. It's locked in. That's your starting point. And when we think of humans, now we got to think about souls, think of eternity, think about relationships, think about connection, think about having a chance to invite them into a family or a conversation, and ultimately the love of Jesus, right? So for me, I would like to think about, hey, how would I like to introduce myself? And one of the things I picked up from a friend from South Africa, he would say, hey, my name's Henny. And I'd say, my name's Jason. He'd say, oh, it's a pleasure. So he made an impression on me that he's very gracious and he really appreciates meeting new people. And so when I spent time with him, his first impressions matched who he was. Yeah. And so I think in ministry, I think the contrast would be not caring about a first impression and just surviving. So someone walks into the lobby of a church, right? And it's not organized.
Well, so
we get an impression.
So you talk about touch points, right?
Sure.
So the touch point you just related to me was a very personal touch point, a meeting. But there's a lot of touch points that occur ahead of that.
A lot of touch points.
Like, what's those touch points that occur before the actual greeting or the gesture where one person talks to the next?
Yeah, so from the standpoint of someone that doesn't get to meet the lead pastor or staff to do the personal impression, an introduction to explain who they are, God's calling, their love for God and others, they're going to bump into other things, like they'll see what your building looks like when they drive by.
Even though it's superficial, they're still making a judgment.
That's correct. That's correct. It's the human condition. Scan, make an appraisal. Scan, make an appraisal. In the Bible, it talks about judging. It's not judgment of you're right or wrong. It's, I'm not going down that dark alley. He seems to be friendly. It's these little
it's assessing.
These little light appraisals that are assessing the situation. So to continue, the shape of the building, are the grasses cut, the trimmings clean, the sidewalks clean, fresh paint, the signage. What are the colors of the fonts? Is it hard to read the sign? Is it easy to read the sign? Does it look dated and worn and not well cared for?
Yeah.
Then you go to things like the front door. What kind of door it is? Is it creaking? Is it old or is it brand new and glass? Both are acceptable. Doesn't mean you have to put a brand new on the door. You could be saying we're a church of heritage and these are 100-year-old doors. You're still making a statement. In addition, you would go and add on to that some of the social touches. Social media page, the website, mass email, a flyer that showed up. All those things, you pick it up. Haven't you seen something and you go, oh, this is trash, I'm throwing this out?
So all of those are communicating something.
They're communicating
so
something.
The point here is to be thinking intelligently about the communications in a variety of ways, whether they're superficial or more relational. That array is important.
Well said. How I would unpack that, Don, is to use that level of intentionality, like you said, no matter how superficial or how personal it is, think about it from the recipient's point of view. Think about it. We know the phrase, walk a mile in my shoes, in the other person's shoes. I think that's critical. And when I spend time with leaders who are gifted and have vision, and oftentimes if I probe a little bit further, they really don't have a real intimate connection with who they're talking to, as much as maybe the calling or as much as the message, or how they could serve. But if you think about it from their perspective, now we go, oh, I'm going to make that very clear. I'm going to make that simple and easy to understand. And I'm going to do a little bit of extra effort to distill it down so that I don't have to be there to explain who we are, what we care about, why they're important to us. We're going to let that piece of communication do a good job to just create that first impression for a good introduction to take the next step.
So do you go about trying to figure out how to be consistent with those first impressions, no matter what they are, that you're bringing a certain level of consistency to what you want people to take?
Well, I think we're talking in your world now, and I would say this is design. We're going to be thoughtful and design. How would we want them to take a journey from they never heard of us all the way through? I think I know of that community, that church. I've seen that church. They're the ones that give out the water bottles. All those steps to I visited. I'm a first time visitor to I'm a member. And so if we think about that, we could get very consistent on the first impressions, how they're being invited, how we're writing a mass email or a social media post or doing a video series. We're thinking about them, and now the consistency can happen because we've thought of them way in advance. So maybe the other side of that, Don, would be something like Easter's coming. We got to do something, and we just do something. We haven't thought that person opening the mailbox.
Intentional.
Intentional.
So all of this, another word that I've oftentimes heard you use, and I've heard others too, but I don't really understand, is brand. Is how does all this relate to brand? How do you manage brand? How does that even happen?
Can I go a little organizational before I get to the bottom line? Or maybe I should go bottom line first.
However you want to explain it to me, I'll try and receive it in whatever best way you have.
So in short, a brand is a reputation. It's an association with an organization in a personal way. So let me go organizational on you.
Okay.
When you start a nonprofit, a 501c3, it's a corporation. The Latin is corpus or corpse. It just means body, not something dead. It just means a body. And so literally, if a pastor is planting a church, for example, he has to set up a corporation or a unique identity, an institution. It's independent of him and his wife. It's independent. Now that institution, follow me here. I'll get you there, Don. Now it has to get a name. It's all these attributes of actually an individual, person. It has a name. It has an identity number. It has a bank account. Eventually it has a credit score. It has constitution and bylaws. It has values. It has vision. It has mission. It has purpose. It has a people group that it's going to care for and serve and invite into community. So this literally is another entity or another person. So it's interesting, right? When you want to invite people into that, to meet this new organization, this community or body, if you will, you want to create a persona that says, hey, welcome to the family. This is one of your family members.
So what you're doing is actually trying to draw that out of an organization. And if they don't recognize it, to help them create it so that they can then be intentional about the way that they're doing these connections.
That's right.
Is that what it's all about?
That's right. And so then what happens is once those things are defined, you talked about mission statements and being focused on purpose and things like that and who we're going to reach. What happens is now these things become visual. So show me your name then. We have a signature, don't we? Here's my signature. That's mine. We get a signature for the organization. There's a logo. There are colors. Why did we choose those colors? Why did you choose the color for your house? Why did you choose that shirt with that color that you have on? It takes on very, very personal elements to be relational to the people that you're inviting in. This is all flowing to the art of invitation to join us to follow God as we follow him together. So love God, love others, find God, follow God together. So these personal elements are now your brand. Oh, it's that church with the bright colors because they love kids. It's the church with they always wear hoodies because they reach the youth.
Do brands evolve over time?
Yes, they mature.
They mature.
Yes, they mature. You understand more of the gifts that God gave you and who's responding to that. And so you create a deeper relationship. You have maybe a larger group and maybe started small to get started. Now you have a more mature group. You can go, oh, wow, we have a senior population that's on this side. We have middle-aged, young families, career, youth, children. You'll see how God pulls, right? Because in Acts it teaches us, and the Lord added to the church daily. Isn't that cool? So as how God brings this flock together, as you get to know them, then what you find out is the people that are in your congregation have gifts and callings and ways to serve. And then it becomes clear, like Pastor Matt talks about, well, what are the needs in the community that we can serve with these gifted folks?
Yeah.
And now we want to reach people in this part of town. What are they, focused on? Then we'll orient some branding elements that says you're welcome too, so that brand can mature. You might find that over time, it was a youthful, maybe focused on college students when you got started. 10 years later, now you're all families, and the brand is maturing. So now you're moving to a family-oriented brand versus just young adults. And so it can mature because it's a relationship. That's what we're talking about, a relationship.
So in some sense, architecture is also a response to a brand.
Yes.
So it follows that branding exercise, so to speak. Or the congregation has a building and somehow they've got to figure out how to marry the brand to whatever it is that they're occupying, or how they use that space, or what do they need to do to change the space, fit the brand, right?
Absolutely. And it's cool because I feel almost like this could be a servant leadership type of thing, because sometimes we need to follow design, the architectural thing, to inspire. Hey, we're maturing here, right? And so the brand can follow, and sometimes the brand needs to take the lead because nobody has gotten clear of who we are, who God's called us to be, what population we're serving, what are the needs in the community, and let that vision and that shape the identity. And then the design architecture, I assume, if they have a clear brand and identity, it actually helps you design much faster to that clarity. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's brings up all kinds of thoughts in my mind about how that happens. I have to tell you, the building that we're in today, I walked into this building, and my perception of this congregation instantaneously changed from what I knew from their older building and their older setting to suddenly I'm thinking about them in a very different way, looking around this building and seeing a whole different scenario here.
Describe what you're seeing, because they're not who are watching us.
If you walked into this building this morning for the first time like I did, and I was the original designer of the layout of this building at least, I walked in and saw this incredibly invigorating space where there's lots of generous natural light in the space.
Agreed.
There's a well-composed color arrangement in the space.
Yes.
The river that they can't see that is formed by the tile that runs through the center of the space here just leads you through visually and everything else into the space. And I'm suddenly thinking, this congregation is going to be a different body than what I had thought of them before. Very different.
Wow, this is great. So I was at the old building as well. It was 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. And I also felt it. What are some of the emotions you feel like when you came into this space and you saw all the light and the colors?
Uplifting. It was a generous building. It was a building that just offers you, I don't know, the opportunity to be visually stimulated in an environment where people are able to form relationship. I just thought this is the kind of space. And it reminded me of an experience that I had some months ago in another building that we did, where I walked in and the pastor came up to me 2 years after being in the building and said, "I just owe you the biggest apology." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I really doubted our ability to use this space the way that you described in the charrette." And he said, "We do, and the community does."
Yeah.
That the community groups that come in just because they like to be in this space, it really works for us.
Wow.
And I thought, man, that's a really unbelievable phenomenon to hear.
Yes.
That the community outside your body has responded so well to this space.
So Don, you just described some brand elements. I love that you did that. You said generous, light, uplifting.
Yeah. My spirit was uplifted.
Yeah. And then you said it was an uplifting experience.
Yeah.
So when you are thoughtful of brands and light and color and space, and you're inviting people into that, they have an experience. And that's the intentionality trying to build with all of that.
And as opposed to the space that they are now occupying, which is small and closed and dark.
Shadowy.
Yeah.
And narrow.
Right.
And corridor by corridor.
Not generous. The antithesis of all the things that I just described.
Agreed.
Maybe frugal, maybe, I don't know what the opposite of generous is, but, maybe it was withholding something. And it was just space that didn't feel like you wanted to be outside that space to be able to form those relationships rather than in the space cultivating those relationships.
Yeah, maybe one word I could say is institutional. I felt like I was in a bygone era in a space created and designed for some sort of institutional function.
Yeah.
Apart from the sanctuary, of course.
Right.
And this one's so much fresh and light.
Vibrant.
Vibrant
is a good word here, yeah. That's another thing that I think would be very important.
Yes.
We want to be a vibrant people.
That's right. This is so fun. There's a lot of overlaps with the design of architecture and brand experience, space to learn, to encounter.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
It is startling when you start to talk about it, because a lot of these things are happening intuitively. You're not bringing these things out, in your own conversation. You're just in the space, feeling the effects of it and responding according to that. I deal with that all the time because I go into new buildings all the time, and I think, without thinking, I form a position. And so
that's right.
Yeah.
And if I were to ask you and say, give me 4 to 7 design elements based on the brand here in this place, you would have been, before this conversation, a little bit like, I don't know where to start. But you did. Uplifting. You went through this entire list of very specific things that was.
Well, and there's an awful lot of stuff too in this building that proportion. I talk about these things all the time, but to actually see it and express it, proportion, the scale of the space compared to the scale of the space that they try to do these things in.
Right.
The color of the space. Yeah. The texture of the space.
Yes.
The texture is critically important in the space.
Right.
Because it breaks things down. It makes there's a certain level of comfort.
Well, think about it. Those are designing elements for the space.
Yeah.
We can do design elements visually for the relational,
okay,
for the colors, for
the communication devices that they use.
Right. So here's a branding element that you would say, we want our brand to be very inviting. So when you see our brand, that would be opposite of IBM, which would be very corporate, very black and white, very serious, very curt. Do you see the difference there? So if you go warm and inviting, and you see a river as your icon, and then you see the river when you walk into the space, you have made a relationship, a correlation, that when they saw it, oh, there's a river, it's very pleasant. And then you walk in the front door and there's the river in tile. There is your consistency.
Yeah. It was appealing. As soon as I walked in, it was like, oh, wow. Yeah, this is terrific. It just drew me in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's amazing when you draw these things versus actually experiencing these things, the differences. It's really amazing. But, that's one of the great things about what I get to do in life, is I get to visualize it, draw it, and then go create it and make sure that it's going to happen in a way.
Now, you told me in past conversations that there are sort of 2 disciplines inside of architecture,
Yeah.
and one is the functional and one is the creative, something like that.
Yeah, I think the technical part versus
Technical.
the creative part. Yeah.
And so you're the rarer species that can kind of talk both languages, if you will.
So in my past, I've been trained both on the technical side and the creative side, but I prefer to spend my time on the creative side. Basically feel like that's where God has placed me.
Yeah.
And I depend on the capabilities of other individuals to take it to that next level to make sure that the technical side is consistent with the creative side.
Right, right. And then I really want to hear, can you tell me, I'm pretty sure that you got into some impressive projects, design projects and architectural projects before BGW that most people don't know about because they associate you with the portfolio that BGW has been able to do. I think you said something over 1,000 projects now inside BGW is incredible.
Yeah.
But didn't you do like fine arts or some really like I would go, are you kidding me?
Well, yeah, I did get a chance to work on some projects that were really strong projects for an entire community. The Rose Wagner Performing Arts Center in Salt Lake was one where 9 different arts groups were participating in the exploration of creating a building where they could both rehearse and portray their particular skill, whether that be music skill. There was the Gina Bachauer group. There was 2 dance groups, modern dance groups and a classical dance group. There was theatrical groups that were participating. So all different realms of the fine arts were brought into this facility. And we had a chance to get involved in that some years ago. And it actually won some great awards, things that we hadn't sought out. One of them was the best arts facility in 25 years in the city of Salt Lake, which is great for Salt Lake City to have something like that because it gets used all the time. I mean, it's just constantly used because of its flexibility. That was one of the buildings that I really enjoyed working on.
I love that background is infused into what you're doing for churches and nonprofits.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of crossovers between the fine arts realm. I mean, in worship venues, if you can't see, if you can't hear, if your chair's uncomfortable, if the sight lines are bad, just is a killer. One of any of those things is a killer for that space. And the fine arts sort of taught me how to exercise some discipline on HVAC systems and so on and so forth too, to make sure. Yeah.
Don, when you do a facility needs assessment, what are some things that you wish were in there in reference to questions? Because I'm still blown away at how quickly you turn around a rendering concept.
Well, so we're pretty good at asking questions about quantity and size and the function and that kind of stuff. But I think that some of the things that would be helpful is what kind of feeling do you want people to elicit from a space when they come in?
We just described that?
Yeah, we just talked about it here, but we don't oftentimes talk about it in our programming documents. Is what are you really looking for here?
Yes.
And that would help us guide a little bit in the later stages perhaps of proportion and scale. Once we get all the adjacencies and the interrelationships worked out in a building, then we can get to those higher order things. What is this building, what kind of emotions does this building emote or represent or bring out in us as individuals as we participate in the space? And in the programming document, we ought to be asking questions along the lines of, what are your thoughts along those kinds of emotions that you're hoping to bring out? And we don't oftentimes get involved in that. Sometimes it's a little bit too much fact-based and not so much on the side where people can express themselves at a little higher level. And then
am I right that you pull from notes that people accidentally, or you have to instruct them to write extra notes in the margins to extrapolate some of the personal feelings? And
I don't know if instruct as much as encourage. We say, check the boxes that you need to check, but give us some more information besides that. And write in the margins if you have to, or a separate piece of paper, however you need to, but give us your thoughts. Invariably, people have thought long and hard about these things, and we want to draw out of them something besides just the check mark boxes. And so for us, that helps. Sometimes they'll write stuff in there like, I visited this location here, this church, and we'll go in and do a little research on that and see it, or Maybe they've been to one of our past projects and they can reference something that they've seen in our projects before that they liked or didn't like, as
Right.
the case may be.
Yeah.
We want it different. We want it this way. Okay, that's helpful to understand. But yeah, those margin notes are coming from the heart. Yeah, they're important for us to understand.
When you saw today, and I put on the screen the empathy map,
Yeah,
and you saw the picture of the family, and you saw these questions around them, almost like an infographic that were call outs that said, what are they thinking and feeling?
yeah,
What are the problems they're trying to solve? What are some of the things that they say in their household on the daily basis? If you were to use something like that, or someone attended a meeting
Yeah.
in the charrette process that drew out some of the top needs in the community,
Hmm.
emotionally, personally, this is where we move away from demographics of income, distance, traffic. That's demographics.
Mm-hmm.
That's site selection language, right? Which we need. But it goes down to that's demographics. This would be on the psychographic, would be more of where do they shop. This is a young family. They shop at Target. They're worried about kids in school. They're figuring out how they're going to raise their children spiritually. Both parents work. One person's they've got to find childcare needs. You start feeling like, oh, wow, they're figuring out marriage. They're figuring out how to be a parent, their careers. They live in a big city, so financial costs, all those things start showing up and creating a makeup of who they're ministering to in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And voila, now we know the space needs to be some sort of either haven or encouragement or a bright spot or a hub or a nexus that, ooh, I can't wait to be there. The kids want to be there. It really does seem to start, if it's wet clay, it really starts allowing you to add some nuances to the clay if the building or the facility in the picture was the clay. Does that make sense to you? Does anything stand out to you?
You know, it's funny, from an empathy standpoint, I think that I would be considered my generation and specifically myself.
Yeah.
We weren't trained in a lot of that stuff. We didn't really understand that.
Yeah.
You know, we were sort of like the old Dragnet series. Just give me the facts, ma'am, you know, and move on. And so learning that stuff later in life has been both personally and in what it is that I do very important. And a lot of that stuff I'm learning from much younger people, like my own kids,
right,
who are telling me about their experience. We have a daughter who has just started going to church, and I realized that one of the reasons that they started going to church is that they are feeling overwhelmed by life, and they're seeking respite, peace, connection.
Yes.
Those kinds of things are very important ahead of where I think eventually they need to get, which is who is God, who is Christ, but in the short term, what they need is peace, respite, connection. And that's what they're telling us.
Right.
And so it's odd because, you know, sometimes I want to get to the facts. You know, tell me where you are spiritually. Have you prayed the prayer yet? Have you gone down this road?
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, I'm here because my son needs a place to play, and I need to talk to some other moms that are going through the same stuff I'm going through.
Right.
And frankly, as couples, we need to have a place where we can come and meet some other couples.
That's right.
Ahead of the more important things that may, you know, lead to a life in Christ.
Yes.
But for now, this is what we need.
Yeah, our era, you're ahead of me, but I've got some grace to prove I'm not too young. It was spiritual community was a pillar. It was a solid.
Yeah.
It was like you wrap your life around it. It's a part of your routine on a weekly basis. Also follow ceremony, a certain
tradition.
Yeah. More, like a spiritual ceremony of tradition. So attending that service, walking through the sacraments and faithful attendance, that was enough. You didn't have to be best friends, and you didn't necessarily have to stick around and talk with anybody. It was a different time because you had your own families, and it was just a different era. And then sometimes there would be a deeper bond with the community, and sometimes there wasn't. Very institutional, and I think some of the stuff that really blows me away is like they wanted to build yet another house of God and yet another house of God with high honor. I think it was really good intentions. And after time, we were like, we don't need another building on the, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so yet things have
they
really
were conflating building with some of the more important things of establishing that spiritual relationship, both in God and with
That's
other
right.
believers. Yeah.
That's right. So if someone were to say in a charrette process, we need a place that provides respite.
Yeah.
If we need to provide a place that feels peaceful, you would starting to think about where you would want to put the children's area, where it may be separate but easily accessible, so that the parents have some of that relational time. They might change the service times, so there's a little extra fun time for the kids. That gives it really starts overlapping and adds some dimension, I think.
Well,
some of the design.
It's interesting. I really got hooked into books that were describing heaven. Randy Alcorn's book about heaven, and a few others. And one of the things that came out of a lot of those studies of the Bible, biblical versions of the Bible, was the role that banquets have in God's kingdom. Getting together around food.
Table,
food,
breaking bread,
fellowship, and how important that is for churches. And a lot of churches have sort of gotten away from that.
You're right.
And
shocking, right?
Shocking, yeah. One of the core parts of who we are. Which
they're tired of volunteering to such an extent that they don't have that time.
Right. And some of the churches that I get to work with, particularly churches that are coming in from distant locations, ethnic churches that are coming in, still retain the importance of gathering together for those meals with one another, to celebrate the food that they were given, the food that they're able to create, that they love and that they enjoy with their families. It's just an amazing phenomenon to see that. And a lot of the churches, we've lost that. So, but I've seen also a return to that too. I mean, today I talked to a church that said it's going to be very important for us to have this kind of a celebration around food. As opposed to isolating themselves from that and letting people go off and solve that at a restaurant after they worship together.
So I think to wrap up here, here's where my brain is landing. During the BGW seminars, there's a phrase that showed up in different ways, but it's me. So I'm thinking of distilling the messaging down, and the distilled message was ministry through fill in the blank. So ministry through technology, audio, visual lighting, ministry through construction, ministry through architecture and design. And that's something that really comes through without anyone saying, here's our new slogan, our tagline. But I think from my heart, because I am a church planting pastor and shepherd is part of my journey as well. But is this ministry through communication so that we can build that relationship a little bit faster, that bond a little faster. I'll use colors, we'll use a logo, we'll use a video, because it's ministry. We really just care about people. And if we have those, that first impression, if it's that impactful, shouldn't we, like you said, use that intentionality? And so I'm going to hold on to that as I walk away from this ministry through. And there was one more thing I wanted to say. Have you ever done a design for a brand new facility and they should have updated their name or brand or logo, and they pushed back and they didn't, and you went, let's hear it? I mean, you don't have to tell me the name.
No, absolutely. Sometimes it's a token gesture back to the previous generation to retain something that they held on to. It's like bringing these brand new facilities online and then carting over the pews and sticking it in the building, because they're trying to assuage a group of people that felt distant and fearful of taking that next step. Right.
So they did. And what's the outcome that you feel? What was it missing, or what did you?
Well, I think missing an opportunity to recreate themselves in a different form of communication at a crucial time. At a crucial time when they're making changes to the facilities, but they didn't follow through in the other patterns that are important to establish at that point in time.
So almost galvanize for the future instead of holding on the past.